Mass Effect has a lot of characters in it. Most are great, a few are bad, and some sine wave wildly between the two. One such character is Miranda Lawson. She's a prominent character with a massive amount of screen time, phenomenal voice acting, and her story consists of a lot of interesting concepts, many of which are executed very well. And yet, all of it suffers because the story structure is held together by chewing gum. The idea for her character arc is a classic one that's been done countless times before, and even a half dozen times in the Mass Effect series. Protagonist and side characters start off not getting along, then as the story goes on, they grow closer and end up as friends or even lovers. Even though it's such a classic arc, the game still had an interesting approach to it. Miranda is the person mainly responsible for bringing Shepard back to life at the start of the game. That's a very distinct story to incorporate this arc into. It's a fun departure from the classic kind and motherly healer archetype, and because you owe her, she's able to get away with being very unpleasant without the player instantly slotting her into the hate forever category. And as I said, Miranda has a bunch of interesting concepts that the game nails. Her shift in loyalty from Cerberus to Shepard, her complex relationship with her sister, her mix of extreme confidence and imposter syndrome. All of those are done perfectly, but they're built on shoddy supports. So where does it go wrong? How do they mess up the simple premise of her starting mean and ending nice, especially when they nailed it before and since? They do start things off on the right track. I particularly like the bit where Shepard starts to wake up. She spends most of the scene yelling at Wilson, but as Shepard is panicking and being re-sedated, you can see this glimpse of genuine kindness in her eyes. It's a good way to plant a seed early on that she's softer under the surface. She helps Shepard escape, and you learn a bit about her through the audio logs you find during the mission. Then, at the end, despite working her ass off to make sure that they're safe, she's very willing to just leave Shepard behind to rot. It becomes clear that she was getting them to safety because they were her pet project, not because she actually cares about them as a person. This is emphasized when she says right to your face that she wanted to implant a control chip in your brain. And alongside that, she's just very unnecessarily mean and closed off, even if you try to be nice. This is contrasted with Jacob, who is being polite and honest with you. During the introduction, they get Miranda exactly right. That's why it feels a lot more noticeable when she immediately falls apart when the game starts proper. She's really excessively mean, then the second you're on the Normandy she's polite, and after you've done a single mission, she's straight up friendly. It's a complete and total jump that makes her feel like an entirely different person. She says this line,
"I'm impressed, Shepard. So far things have gone exceptionally well."
And it's like, yeah, of course things have gone smoothly so far. We just started! You do the literal bare minimum, and she's like, well, that's all my doubts settled. You truly are great, Commander. It feels like they had a point A of her being mean, and a point B of her warming up to you, and rather than it being a natural transition, it's the narrative equivalent of a motion tween. And here's the thing, even if it was enough to fully convince her that you do indeed live up to the hype, that isn't why she was being mean in the first place. She's cold towards you because she doesn't think that you'll be loyal to Cerberus. She already knows that Shepard is a badass. There are multiple ways that you can undercut Cerberus in the very first missions of the game, so it is entirely possible that she goes, I don't like you because I think you'll undercut Cerberus. To which you respond, you're right, I hate Cerberus, check it out, I'm gonna undercut them. And that convinces her that she was wrong about you? It's just nonsense. Now, I think I can see why it ended up this way. Miranda is the first character to give you their loyalty mission. You get it as soon as you reach Act 2, and it would be pretty annoying if she was asking for your help while still being a total jerk. So they wanted her to have already warmed up to you before then, which means she needs to start warming up to you very quickly during Act 1. There are numerous ways to fix this. They could make it so she starts warming up to you only once you reach Act 2, and have her loyalty mission be one of the last ones that you receive instead of the first. Or they could still have her start warming up to you early, but make it so that Act 1 is her going from mean to neutral, instead of mean to friendly. They do a much better job portraying a gradual shift when it comes to her moving further and further away from Cerberus ideals, with her defenses of them growing less ferocious and more apologetic. It could still use some work. I think the fact that you can't confront her about Toombs' squad is frustrating as hell, especially if you're a sole survivor. But overall, this is a very believable and well done transition. Anyways, she's now friendly, even if getting here was clunky. How does her story fare from here on out? I think it's at this point that more issues with the execution of the story pop up alongside the structural issues. Let's look at her loyalty mission. After Miranda escaped from her asshole father, he simply created a copy of her. So Miranda went back and took the child, spiriting them away to safety. She's been protecting her from the shadows since, never even letting her know that she exists. But now her location has been compromised, and you need to prevent his hired thugs from collecting her. The idea of her protecting her genetically modified clone sister is really cool, and the intended moral grayness of her stealing a child for reasons that she insists are justified is interesting. So how does it falter? Well, first, the game tries to muddy the morality by presenting the Eclipse as doing official business, in that they are acting legally. But in Samara's recruitment mission, it's made clear that to become an official member of Eclipse, you have to murder somebody. How are they allowed to do official business? Shouldn't wearing an Eclipse uniform be a confession of murder and enough to get a warrant for arresting them? And that kinda lines up with how they're presented in this mission, with the way the captain just murders this dock worker for no reason. But like, why were you casually talking with them anyways? Honestly, the gangs in Mass Effect 2 kinda suck across the board, but that's a whole different topic. Another issue with the mission is that based on everything we hear about her father, rescuing Oriana wasn't even a morally gray action. It was entirely justified. It seems like the game comes to that conclusion as well, since you can only side with Miranda, and Niket even admits that he's mostly collecting her for the money. But that just means that it feels like this aspect of the story, the question of whether Miranda was justified in taking a baby away from her father, is answered with a yup, moving on. They either should have explored this aspect further and made it properly morally gray, or focused on it less, rather than its awkward half-implementation. And lastly, why don't they look identical? Oriana is a clone of Miranda, but they just look like normal sisters. It's a video game. They could literally copy-paste Miranda's face mesh if they wanted to. And don't even get me started on Mass Effect 3 where they look nothing alike. As for what the mission does right, I quite like that she was betrayed by the one person she truly trusted. And Niket's mixture of self-justification and shameless greed is pretty nuanced. I like that he seems to genuinely care about Miranda and Oriana, but he will admit that the money is one of his main motivators for betraying her. Some other positives. The layout of this mission with all the moving crates is fun, and Enyala is another of Mass Effect 2's great one-off antagonists, even if the fact that she was given this job makes no sense.
I was just waiting for you to finish getting dressed. Or does Cerberus really let you whore around in that outfit?
I like her. Are we still recruiting?
The choice at the end, whether to encourage Miranda to actually properly introduce herself to her sister or not, is compelling as well, even if it kinda has an obvious right answer. It's certainly not a bad mission, just flawed. I think after you've done something so personal for her, it makes sense that she would be much friendlier. This is where she should have really started to be nice to you. She should have had no choice but to let her guard down around you for this mission, and afterwards, she decides not to put it back up. Oh well, even if it was janky getting here, at least she'll be consistent from this point on. A nice, friendly...
It wasn't Cerberus. Not really. But clearly you were a mistake.
Oh no. So, this part. After you've done both Jack and Miranda's loyalty missions, they get into a big fight. They'd been at each other's throats for the entire game, but this is where tensions boil over. You get the option to side with either of them and lose the loyalty of the other, or if you're Paragon Renegade enough, you can talk them both down. Now, there is a structurally identical scene later in the game with Tali and Legion, but the big difference there is that in that fight, both of them have an understandable perspective. In the Jack-Miranda fight, Miranda's in the wrong. There's no getting around it, she's wrong, Jack's right. And that is emphasized by the fact that you are almost certainly going to see this scene directly after Jack's loyalty mission, which is focused on the immense trauma that Cerberus put Jack through. Remember, Miranda gives you her loyalty mission the instant you enter Act 2, and the game really pushes you towards the planet it's on. It is fine for her to have flaws and be wrong at times. I think this is represented perfectly in the Collector base when she incorrectly says that she can handle the biotic field. This fight isn't her being mistaken or imperfect, it's a return of the hateful and mean Miranda from the very start of the game. And if you side with Jack, she is furious. Like I said, you lose her loyalty. You disagree with her once on a matter that she is absolutely in the wrong about, and she doesn't forgive you. Unless you tell her that you actually agree with her and just lied so Jack would calm down. She will under no circumstances accept that she's wrong here. It gives this impression that she jumps back and forth between being nice and cruel with no rhyme or reason. Or worse, that she's truly just an awful person who's being nice solely to cozy up to her boss. This isn't the intent. She's supposed to be a good person who acts callous because her defenses are up, but this makes her seem like a cruel person who puts on a disingenuous facade of kindness. And Miranda's loyalty is actually kind of weird. She's the character who has the most dialogue in the collector base. The conversations where you discuss your next steps are primarily done with her. Rather than record this dialogue for every character to account for who you didn't recruit and who's died up to that point, they just make her unkillable. It is impossible for her to die for the vast majority of the final mission. It is only in the last stretch that she can get killed. Now, if she's not loyal, her survivability does plummet at that point. Disloyal characters are always the first to die in the Hold the Line sequence, and they can't survive if you take them into the final boss. But of all the characters in the game, Miranda has by far the best odds of surviving the final mission. And before I get into what that means, I want to talk about a couple of her specific scenes in the collector base. First, I like that she asserts that she can both lead the second team and hold up the biotic field. She can successfully lead the team, but cannot hold the field. I think this is a great way to play into her characterization that she is both overconfident in her abilities and feels the need to do everything herself. The job that she succeeds in is the one more dependent on her own knowledge and skills, and the one that she fails at is more dependent on the strength of her genetic tailoring. Great stuff. The other scene I want to talk about is one that I do like, but I think there's a missed opportunity. So, if you bring Miranda to the final boss, she gets specific dialogue with the Illusive Man about whether or not to blow up the collector base.
Miranda, do not let Shepard destroy the base.
Or what? You'll replace me next?
I gave you an order, Miranda.
I noticed. Consider this my resignation.
This is a great scene. I think it's a good conclusion to the arc of her loyalty shifting away from Cerberus and towards you. Which makes it extra weird that you still get this scene even if she isn't loyal. Even if she hates your guts, she still sides with you over Cerberus. She is guaranteed to die within minutes as soon as you finish the boss fight. I feel like it would have been way more interesting if disloyal Miranda sided with the Illusive Man here. Maybe you have to kill her and face the final boss with only one teammate. Or maybe she just says that you'll discuss it later and you never get a chance to. Like I said, just a missed opportunity. Anyways, the mission ends and Miranda is almost certainly one of the survivors. So how does Mass Effect 3 make use of her, since she's more likely to be present for it than pretty much anybody else? Simply put, it doesn't. Despite the fact that she's going to be alive for most playthroughs of Mass Effect 3, she is wasted harder than any other squad mate from 2. Ironically, one of the characters that's used best is Morden, who's the hardest to keep alive in the collector base. None of the squad mates introduced in Mass Effect 2 rejoin you in 3. They always have an excuse not to, ranging from I'm dying, to I have other commitments, to I don't want to. Yet it's Miranda that has the worst reasoning, because everything she says just gives her more reason to join you. She pops up a few times to have one-on-one meetings with you where she goes, "Crikey, I'm trying to find my sister and running from Cerberus." First, the Normandy is the best place to hide from Cerberus. It is an Alliance stealth ship that is outfitted with an AI that knows Cerberus protocols and has been outwitting them for months. If she doesn't want Cerberus to get her, this is the place to go. Second, the Normandy has the goddamn Shadow Broker on it, the biggest and most influential information broker in the galaxy. If you're looking for somebody, are they not the best person to talk to? Miranda has always been somebody who wants to handle things herself. But the one thing that consistently breaks through that mindset is keeping her sister safe. But now she refuses your help, even if doing so could cost Oriana her life. This could have been really interesting if it was explored as paranoia caused by Niquette's betrayal, but it isn't. It's not even contrivance, it's nothing! And it seems that BioWare decided that she was too easy to keep alive in Mass Effect 2, because now you need to do everything exactly right, or she dies. You need to meet her on the Citadel, then call her from the Citadel, then meet her on the Citadel again and give her access to Alliance resources. Then you need to pass a difficult Paragon Renegade check. If you do all that, she survives. Unless you lost her loyalty in 2, or romanced her in 2 and dumped her in 3, then she still dies no matter what you do. I like the idea of having to do a bunch of things right in order to keep a character alive, but the problem is that it's all very arbitrary. With the video call, you warn her that Kai Lang exists so she can take these vague precautions, but she doesn't seem to actually do anything differently. And there's no explanation as to what resources you give her access to or how she uses them. She refuses to tell you when there is absolutely zero reason for her to keep it secret. It's a stupid, contrived choice, just another opportunity to accidentally get her killed. It all contributes to this feeling that her role in Mass Effect 3 is just so empty. I've heard rumor that the reason Miranda gets so sidelined is because her actress, Yvonne Strahovski, was busy during the making of Mass Effect 3. And while we can see that she did indeed have a packed schedule, I've never seen any confirmation that that was the reason why. And besides that, I don't think the issue here is solely a lack of screen time. Imagine if instead of meeting her periodically throughout the game, she was just entirely missing. You try to find her for information on Cerberus, but she's completely vanished. Even Liara can't find her. Maybe you work with Oriana to try and track her down. That would have been much more compelling than the random check-ins. This approach probably would have taken more work, but if there was any character that it was worth investing time and resources into, it's the one who's most likely to be alive for the game. In the end, I just think it's kind of sad. Miranda is a very interesting character with so many things going for her, but it's all let down by the flaws and a shoddy structure that spans from the start of 2 to the end of 3. If every aspect of her character was done as well as her strengths, I think she would be a strong contender for the best character in the series. I think that's why she's a pretty divisive character. Those who latch onto the strengths really like her, and those who can't overlook the flaws don't. To wrap this up, let's go through some of her other strengths and weaknesses that I haven't really had a good chance to mention. I like that she is a very strong squad mate. It means that she has the strength to back up all of her confidence. It's hard to be annoyed when she really is as good as she says. She's so strong that it's actually imbalanced. She outpaces every other squad mate by miles. It means that you're actively nerfing yourself if you ever leave her behind on a mission. Though that's more of a weakness for everybody that isn't her. Unlike Samara, I think her very sexualized outfit works. She was built in a lab to be a perfect specimen. She knows she's stunning and leverages it to her advantage. She's a bit of a femme fatale, but it's not the only thing she is. Though the camera was straight up shameless in the original release. It would contort itself into bad angles just to focus on her butt, even when the conversation was meant to be serious. It was laughably gratuitous, and I'm glad they toned it down in the Legendary Edition. From the tiny bits we see of her, Oriana is a fun character. She feels like a much less jaded and cynical Miranda. Which means it really stinks how little of her we see. It would have been really cool if she had an expanded role in Mass Effect 3. And I could keep doing this for a while. Miranda isn't a good or bad character. She's both. It could have been worse, but it also could have been better. Thanks for watching, folks. Thank you to all my patrons, and an extra special thank you to Audie T, Amy Lech, Ilya Kukushkin, Legitimate Salvage, and Samuel Wagner.